Good afternoon, how are you? It's already 1:09 in the afternoon today, April 20th. Let's get into what's happening in the world. What are Sanat Takahishi's reactions to the 7.4 earthquake? What's happening in the world? What's going on in Iran? Obviously, we're also going to talk about this rain, black rain that has appeared this time. It's not in Iran, it's not in the Middle East, it's black rain that has appeared in a region near the Black Sea in Tuapse. We're going to talk about that topic. Obviously, we're going to look at many issues, important issues regarding international topics. What happened with this Iranian ship seized by US Marines? What connections does it have with China? And other important matters about what's happening in the world. Go ahead and share. There are glitches happening, be aware of that. There are glitches happening on platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. So, for that reason, help us out with a like and by sharing, because the videos aren't reaching anyone or almost no one. In fact, they weren't shared. How did you get here? Tell us how you joined, how you found out we were live. Please let us know. It's really important to understand where the problem is. Let's dive into the details, starting with this image of Sanat Takahishi. Now let's listen.
To everyone in the regions where a tsunami alert has been issued, evacuate immediately to higher ground, evacuation buildings, or other safe and elevated places.
That was the moment when the tsunami alert was issued. Obviously, this has already been cancelled, as we've already mentioned. The black rain that's been falling in this area is also noteworthy. Look at those black droplets there, those black dots. They're not part of the texture of that chair, but rather part of the rain that's falling in different parts of Russia. In Tuapse, black rain has been reported. This happened after a series of attacks on oil facilities by Ukraine. And the thing is, where there are attacks on refineries, oil facilities, and so on, there are usually these kinds of fires that later cause black rain. After the incident, residents reported a strange black rain, a dark residue that began to cover cars, buildings, and roads, causing immediate concern. Let's see where this area of Tuapse is in the world. While we go over the details of what happened in this region of the world, there we are obviously still in the Middle East. Let's go to the Tuapse area. It's in this region facing the Black Sea, as you can see. It's in this area, there's Tuapse. Let's zoom out a bit to see exactly where it is. Look, here's Crimea. Yes, on this side, here's Ukraine. All of this is Russia, this whole part. That's the part that connects Russia and the invaded area of Crimea. Here's that famous bridge. They've tried to destroy it so far, but haven't been able to. This bridge is the one that supplies weapons to Crimea. Well, this area of Tuapse, which has been constantly attacked, is the one that supplies oil to the troops in Crimea. By the way, refining, etc. They claim this material would be a byproduct of oil combustion, raising doubts about its possible toxicity and potential health effects. The Russian authorities claim that despite the fire, the air quality remains within safe levels, obviously trying to contain the fear. However, the public perception is different. Many residents have decided to evacuate the area while this issue of black rain continues. The thing is, fuel has basically been the focus of the war in recent years. It's been a couple of years now where they've been hitting Russia's fuel harder and harder, right? And also, obviously, Russia is trying to affect Ukraine's energy resources as well. And we've already seen what happens in the Middle East too, where energy infrastructure is also targeted. Both Iran's energy infrastructure and that of Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and even Oman itself has been affected. Good afternoon, how are you? Jose Mendez, Dieguito, how have you been? Good afternoon to you too. I have WhatsApp and YouTube notifications turned on, so that's how I find out. 20 minutes in advance, that's great. Look, do it like MT, because that's how the information is getting through faster, right? I mean, with the Telegram and WhatsApp notifications, right? So it reaches you automatically, right? Because the notifications aren't coming through, right? In fact, check how many people are joining the live right now. I've been watching other YouTubers' live streams to see if the same thing was happening to them. And yes, compared with their usual range, only about 2 or 3 times fewer people are joining, right? So, well, I ask you to help us out, to let people you know who might be interested in the report or the information know about it. Please help us with that. Look, another thing that also draws attention is the lack of transparency from the Russian authorities, who usually don't. I mean, just to say that everything is calm, that everything is fine, but people also need real information about what's truly happening. And that's the complaint right now about Tuapse, about this black rain that's been hitting that area, right? Well, another image that is surprising today is this one, which shows how the earthquake was experienced from different homes. Well, in this house, this is another house, it's the exact moment showing how everything in this person's apartment moves. The exact moment when the 7.4 was being felt in that remote region, which they say is far from the earthquake's epicenter. But even so, the movement was felt over there in Japan, in the north. By the way, this earthquake happened in Japan. We already did a live broadcast about the topic, but fortunately, it seems nothing major happened, although they're still analyzing possible damage to buildings. Another thing that stands out is the following image. Listen to this.
My dear ones, good morning. So the video is up. The damn Ukrainians are already flying with the pilot and operator 2,000 kilometers apart. It's crazy, the girls are bending over. As they say, some guys sleep with women, and here we don't even have anything to put on our feet, damn it. This is fucking crazy, guys. That's right, damn it. This war is getting the best of us. It's fucking crazy. We're trying like turtles, but it overtakes us, damn it, like a cheetah. That's right, damn it. What can you say, guys? And what are our problems here? Damn it, Banja, damn, Banjalite, you heard her, damn it. Even Peskov, damn it, started talking for fuck's sake. This is just a fucking clique. They all scolded her, everyone criticized her. Damn it, Solovyov, Milonov, this is crazy.
This is part of what a Russian blogger is saying. This is from the Russian blogger Yevgeny Goldman, who, well, has been strongly criticizing how Ukraine has managed to get into Russia and how Russia hasn't been able to defend itself. Basically, there is no defense. Russia has offensive capability, but there is no ability to defend such a large territory as Russia. This blogger, while he was throwing all kinds of insults because he was extremely upset, is not the first one. Multiple bloggers are warning that Russia does not have defensive capability, and this, well, has led to a steady stream of comments from people like this. Let's move on to other reactions from around the world. Meanwhile, the same spokesperson, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson, says the following. Listen to this.
Mr. Van has gone to Pakistan. I would like to ask if we come to the conclusion that negotiations should be resumed and that we want to reach a possible agreement, it will happen. Given the unbalanced behavior of the American side and the policies of Donald Trump, can this tawaf be trusted? Should we trust the American signature that appears on it?
That inspired trust. It's natural for us to have no trust in negotiations with the United States. There is no trust between Iran and the United States due to the long and continuous transgressions they have committed. We make decisions based on our interests and considerations, and the same should apply to any understanding or possible agreement. We must act in such a way that our own guarantees and capabilities are what ensure the implementation of that understanding. As for the United States, they traveled or said they wanted to travel. Well, that's their business. But as I already mentioned, for a very clear reason, it really is a sign. The United States doesn't seem serious. On the contrary, there are repeated and numerous signs that there is no seriousness from the United States to move forward with diplomacy in its real and conventional sense, and not diplomacy in the sense of dictating orders.
Well, that's part of the reaction from the foreign affairs spokesperson, the spokesman. There is no trust. Basically, that's not what they're saying. There is no trust that things can be carried out through diplomatic negotiation. Obviously, if it were logical, there have been many betrayals of what has been agreed upon. An agreement is made and then, well, the agreement is broken, and this happens constantly. They do it too, by the way. So, well, I think that the distrust is on both sides, in my opinion, and that any kind of agreement is still far from happening. Meanwhile, the networks in general have been struggling, they've been failing. We see here on Down Detector on Google, for example, an outage. Banco Buenos Aires, a series of outages. A moment ago, Banco Azteca, Call of Duty. If we go further, TikTok Santander. This set also has problems there. Gemini, not Gemini's artificial intelligence, Instagram. Well, in my 14 years in technology, the platforms are always there. They don't open there. Facebook, all the phone companies always have problems there. But well, let's say that among the platforms, there's also Microsoft Outlook and YouTube as well. There's also Messenger. Is there as well? Well, all the companies, I insist, WhatsApp too, and even Twitter, which also has a major issue at the moment. Well, that's part of what's been happening, and that's why I say something strange happened there. No. There's always the pattern that when there are solar storms, these kinds of problems usually happen, although they never say why or what the reason for the situation was. This time, well, it happens again. Another topic that also draws attention. This was shown by Global News or Global News. Actually, they showed this image. This is what it is here. We're seeing this in Rio de Janeiro, an operation they were carrying out in a favela, and it's also a tourist area at the same time. So suddenly, the tourists ended up in the middle of an operation apparently against drug trafficking, and this operation in the Vidagal community left the tourists trapped at the top of the hill. The civil police are conducting searches to arrest the leaders of the Comando Vermelho, the so-called Red Command. It's a group. Well, it's like a gang, something like that, a mafia, a gang, and so the tourists got stuck. There were about 200 tourists up there on the peak who couldn't leave. Obviously, they couldn't come down. There were gunshots and so on. The trail to this famous tourist spot in Rio starts at the top of Vidagal, and the tourists who went up to see the sunrise, well, now they really couldn't come down, right? I imagine that by now they've already helped them come down from the hill. I guess so, right? We'll have to wait a bit longer to see if that's confirmed. By the way, another matter within these images has been drawing attention. This thing about Tuapse that I mentioned to you a moment ago about the black rain, this is the previous attack, right? I mean, it was an attack carried out by the Ukrainian defense, an attack on a series of areas where, after some time, some fires broke out. The Russian authorities reported that the fires in Tuapse had supposedly already been extinguished, but well, this is also what in theory would have caused that black rain. All that fire in theory, I insist, because it's a topic that still isn't very clear. I mean, we'll have to wait for more data as well about recent reports. Iraq was reportedly going to hold a meeting urgent with the Iranians. This also draws attention. Something is happening between the Iranians and the Iraqis themselves, right? We have to remember that there are Iraqi groups there that have a relationship with the Houthis and other groups that are against them that see them as enemies, right? That's also, well, part of what's happening. We're going to get into the details of that matter, and while people are joining, leave me a comment about where you're watching us from and if the audio sounds good. By the way, with all these issues the networks are having, let us know if you can hear and see us well, okay? Earlier, people were saying the video was freezing a little bit. Our internet is at 100%, so if it freezes, it's not on our end. It could be the platform or something else. We'll have to wait for more details. But look, Mohammed Shia al-Sudani is still in the race to become Iraq's prime minister, and in the end they're making their internal political moves. They're having all this conflict within his own political bloc. He has to be chosen as a candidate, and there are several objections to him. This opposition isn't new. Several actors in Iraqi politics have been questioning this person's leadership for being very close to the Iranians. According to sources close to al-Sudani, he has hinted that this control could be used by the old political establishment. It could, they say, guarantee order and balance in an environment dominated by armed groups. So it's possible that armed groups might start wanting to control other regions and that he would be the one to manage them, so to speak, but that would also empower him even more. The situation is about who will be or what candidates there will be for the next prime minister in Iraq. That's why it's striking that the Iraqis and Iranians are meeting. Something strange is going on there. Let's get into the details of what is known, but that also obviously draws a lot of attention. The head of the Quds forces of the Revolutionary Guard. That's the most unfortunate part, because in the end, it's not the politicians meeting with the Iraqis, it's the most extreme military wing. We're discussing this person. Let's see if I can spot him in the estimate. The head of the Quds forces, which are the Iranian special forces, meeting with the Iraqis. I mean, that's the shocking part. In an apparently urgent meeting. The head of the Quds force of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Ismail Qaani, visited Baghdad and has held talks with several political and militia leaders. Note pro-Iranian militias inside Iraq. Militias that have already attacked U.S. troops in the past. So here you can clearly see how the Iranians are moving the chess pieces to have even more influence over Iraq. Currently, amid the chaos, they're taking advantage of the situation. If we look at the map, well, we have to remember that Iran and Iraq share a huge border. This entire border is shared, and we also have to remember that Iraq has very limited access to the sea. They only have a very small piece that reaches the sea. Towards the Persian Gulf, just this small area, Iraq has several weaknesses that cause this. They're basically infiltrated, right? We have to remember that there are Shiite groups inside Iraq armed by Iran. And even more so now, since they're controlled by the same people from the Revolutionary Guard. Qaani, whose Quds force is the main support. Note, it's the main support. The support for the pro-Iranian Shiite militias here. In other words, he's arriving there. Basically, he's the one controlling these militias that, I insist, have attacked Kuwait, have attacked Israel, have attacked US troops. They've gotten involved in Syria. I mean, they do whatever they want. It's, let's say, another power within Iraq and now visiting as if nothing the Iraqi political elite, right? A very important topic. The United States Department of the Treasury recently imposed rounds of sanctions and offered rewards against the Iran-backed Shiite militias in Iraq. Since that time, the United States has wanted to control these militias or eliminate them, but so far it hasn't been possible. Well, it has managed to maintain itself, let's say, not in that region. And obviously it's an issue, a problematic and dangerous issue for the future of the region, which are still controlled by the Iranians, the famous militias as they call them, the proxy militias. Well, not just them, but in general, that's what they're called, right? The proxy wars that the Iranians have in Iraq, in Syria with Hezbollah, in Lebanon with Hezbollah, with Hamas, in Gaza, and so on and so on. Don't underestimate them, they're very widespread. The Iranians are spread throughout that region. Alright, now let's move on to other important topics as well. The Germans are making an important shift where, look, they show this kind of robots. It's a war robot, kind of like a small tank, yes, with the ability to get into frontline conflicts without putting human troops at risk. There is Zelensky presenting these Ukrainian robots, but now the German industry is making an important strategic shift. Germany and the German industry are making a strategic shift that will be key for the future of Europe, where they will manufacture high-tech weapons together with Ukraine and Ukrainian expertise. In the midst of the crisis of its traditional economic model, Germany has begun a drastic transition. After decades of leadership in automobile manufacturing, that country is now on the path to becoming the backbone of Europe's defense industry, a transformation that is being driven by the same because of the paralysis that the industry is experiencing right now. We must remember that strong competition has also come from Asia, from Japan, from Korea, and from China itself. Berlin, the German automobile industry is kind of weak right now. So right now we're also going to focus that industry partly on industrial topics, robotics, and so on. According to what the Wall Street Journal reports, the magnitude of this shift, of this change, the escalation of public funding in which approximately 1 trillion euros will be allocated to this project. That's just government spending, not including the significant industry investment. They're making it happen. The government itself is giving this industry incentives so that it accelerates, so that the high-tech arms sector develops. This is also part of trying to save the German industrial model from its decline, which is plummeting. It's not doing well in that regard. It has already led to 15,000 job losses and ongoing issues with car manufacturing and other challenges they're facing. Currently, the service sector is generating 70% of the economic output. In other words, not the industrial sector as it always used to be. Currently, most income comes from that. Germany's main source of income is the service sector and not the automotive manufacturing industry, which is what Germany is known for. Another important issue as well. Check this out. According to reports from Spain, Spain may be taking part in a possible plan to distribute jet fuel within the European Union. Spain, which has oil and enough reserves of gas or rather fuel for airplanes, says it will be supporting other countries in the European Union. The war between the United States, Israel and Iran, and Tehran's retaliation have triggered a supply crisis for European airlines. And they have asked the countries that have extra to distribute a bit to other countries. There is no shortage of fuel for airplanes. It is noted that a joint purchasing platform would help increase purchasing power and would allow countries to secure more affordable prices, an option that is now being analyzed by the European Commission itself. Spanish refineries have already increased production by 60% compared to normal levels. Or that's it. Well, with the Spanish ramping up production, this will bring resources to Spain and will also help ease the problem a bit for Europe. Obviously a very interesting topic as well. Another thing that stands out is that, well, the Iranian regime is setting a condition for reaching an agreement. Meanwhile, the United States has already sent J.D. Vance to Pakistan to Islamabad. The Iranian regime is putting more and more conditions on all of this. For now, another condition they're setting is that in order to negotiate, they have to, and they keep insisting on this because they mentioned it yesterday. But anyway, they're doing it again this time through the vice president. The first vice president, whose name is Mohammad Reza Aref, has said that they have to lift the blockade that the United States has in the Strait. We have to remember that right now the Strait is blocked by destroyers operating in the area. They have already detained several ships. And they've made them turn back, right? So, what the Iranians are saying, what the Ayatollah regime is saying today, Monday, is that it should be maintained. Well, outside of all these restrictions, come on, let the United States open the Strait for them as well. To be able to negotiate, that's basically what they're saying. They argue that securing this strategic passage comes at a cost and tied energy market stability to ending pressure on Tehran. And also, the idea that this is going to be charged for. I mean, they are going to charge for security according to this. So basically, they're bringing back the idea that they want to charge for passing through the Strait of Hormuz, right? It's an issue that has really bothered everyone, especially the countries that aren't even at war, and now they want to charge them for this whole situation. We're also seeing yet another fire at a refinery, but this time in India. How many of these have we seen? Considering that we've seen them even in Mexico, the United States, Australia, and Europe, on this occasion, in India as well, a fire reportedly broke out at the refinery of the Pachipara Rajasthan Petrochemical Complex in Rajasthan. Rather, Pachipara in Rajasthan in India. This, by the way, happened a day before its inauguration. I mean, it was just about to be inaugurated. Prime Minister Modi, Narendra Modi, was going to attend, and then the whole complex caught fire. No, possibly. I imagine they're going to wait until everything is ready, right? So they can inaugurate it, right? Also, well, this moment catches attention when a plane, a Boeing 737 from Alaska Airlines lands. There is, well, you can barely see it. Actually, you can't see it. It's really far away, honestly. But at that moment, it breaks hard because there are some deer crossing back here. Some deer crossed in front of it, and well, the tires actually hit the deer. No serious injuries have been reported, but it was an incident. I mean, the sudden braking really did scare the crew and the passengers as well. Obviously, it was the Alaska Airlines 737 which, well, clearly left behind this sudden braking and this bad experience, so to speak. A safety inspection had to be carried out in the area. They had to check, obviously, all the places to make sure there weren't more deer around. It wasn't that the deer got away. They got into the area and, well, it almost caused an accident in that area. And obviously the deer didn't survive either. Obviously not. I don't know if any of them survived, but at least most of them were crushed by the tires. Not a great topic either. Among the images that have been circulating of these robots that participated or were present at this robot half marathon in China, well, there's this other image of a robot that's more relaxed, just strolling along, separates from the group, waves, and starts striking Bruce Lee-like poses. We'll see it in a bit. It keeps moving forward, but it greets people, gets closer, and people seem to ask it to do a kick or do some moves. And well, the robot there tries to please the audience a bit. It even started dancing a little. You know, it's not really that good. In the end, it's just an exhibition. That's what it's doing in that sense. About the features of those robots, we're even going to see some kicks in a moment. You'll see how this topic gets interesting. Let's see if we can catch it over there. Let's wait a little bit. But anyway, that's what they call the Beijing Robot Half Marathon, right? Well, it's shown the best and the worst because some are still struggling, some are looking at each other. That's great. That's really great. Straight turn, roundhouse kick. Well, a bit of everything, right? There it is. Just look at that. Super interesting. That's the classic Bruce Lee stance, right? He just needed to do it like this, right? Well, this is part of the exhibitions they put on, and we'll see more and more of these kinds of events. Not just in China, but in many parts of the world. Not for now. Well, let's move on to other important topics as well. On other topics, the Central Bank of Iraq denies reports about a suspension of US dollar shipments amid rising tensions. According to what they say, it had been rumored that the Central Bank of Iraq, the CBI, issued a statement rejecting the reports, and that indicated that the United States has stopped shipments of physical US dollars to Baghdad. It denied these claims about the financial freeze. What is circulating in regional media? This too. That's the fear right now because of the increasingly strong relationship between Iran and Iraq. It's also an issue that is obviously concerning, isn't it? More images are also emerging of this rain, black rain that appears over there in Tuapse, right? In Russia, in Tuapse, right? Tuapse, right? Well, some other images are starting to appear where you can see these scenes. This is after, well, these fires. According to the details, the dark residue has been covering cars, roads, and buildings after a drone attack by Ukraine on a local refinery. The fuel also entered the Black Sea, where a large oil slick of approximately 10,000 square meters has been observed. According to reports from the people in the area, the authorities claim that the fire did not cause any air pollution, or so they say. Well, just imagine that, right? That's the report from the Russians. They say no, it didn't cause any air pollution. Well, it's part of not seeing reality. Period. It's crazy, right? How could there not have been air pollution? Please. Well, that's how things are more or less. Hey, there's an image going around that's getting a lot of attention. This is over there in Teotihuacan. Yes. Where a person climbs to the top of the pyramid and starts shooting. And those are supposed to be super guarded with a lot of security, etc. What happened there? Supposedly, what they say is that a shooter opened fire at the Pyramid of the Moon, reports. All right, there he goes. There goes the person. Hey. They're crazy. They're crazy. They're crazy. They're crazy. Now it's not clear if they are. All right. Who knows what's going on there? But a shooter opened fire from the Pyramid of the Moon. Multiple people are reporting that they witnessed the incident. What happened in Teotihuacan? Let's get into the details, shall we? What is known so far? But this topic really draws attention, doesn't it? What happened with this situation over there in Mexico, right? In the center of the country, right? And let's get into the details, right? Reports indicate it was a shooting in Teotihuacan. 2 people lost their lives and 4 were injured. Terrible situation. The security cabinet has reported that a man opened fire from the Pyramid of the Moon and then took his own life, according to the reports. So the person started shooting and then took his own life. It's a really strange situation. Here in Mexico, we don't see that. It's common in other countries and in the United States to see random shootings where people target others and then take their own lives. It's very strange. The suspect shot at the tourists who were visiting the place, killing a Canadian woman and injuring 4 other people. Reports from the security cabinet say the shooter died by suicide. Well, that's part of what happened. The armed attack began shortly after noon at the northern end of the architectural complex. A man who was climbing the Pyramid of the Moon, the second largest in Teotihuacan, standing 43 meters tall. Well, that's how things are. That's the situation on this matter. Let's move on to other important topics. Another image that also stands out is this one of Donald Trump, once again talking about how he's winning the war. He claims that he's winning the war in Iran by a wide margin and lashed out against journalism. Again, right? Why? Because they tell him the truth and show him reality, which he doesn't like. He prefers to live in his own world. And, well, he says everything else is false, right? He criticizes it and just says it doesn't exist. Unfortunately, he's not the only one. Many politicians here in Latin America are like that. They don't want to be questioned anymore. They don't want to struggle with having to, well, face reality. Simply, well, everything they don't like they say is false. It's fake news and that's it, right? Here in Mexico, 2 months. We told you here when Greenpeace said, look, there's an oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. 2 months, more than 2 months, over 30 days, they kept saying it's not true, it's fake news, it's false. I don't know what, whatever. What happened? They had to admit it because it was obvious. All the people there were saying, hey, so what? What about this oil? Where is it coming from? Magically, right? And they had to admit it after 2 months of insisting that it was false. The same thing happens with Trump and the same thing happens with many politicians. Bukele himself and other politicians. Milei, Pedro Sanchez, all of them, everyone. I mean, all politicians simply don't like it if you question them, right? Left, right, it doesn't matter. I mean, you just question them if, well, you know, right? That's the problem right now, that they don't like to see the situation, what's really happening, if it's against them. Many times, it's not even their fault. I mean, many times what's happening in certain issues isn't even their fault. And even so, if they're not on the agenda they want to set, right? Well, then it's not valid, right? Well, this just keeps happening. This time, well, Donald Trump claims that, well, the Wall Street Journal, which by the way, the Wall Street Journal is a right-wing newspaper, but it also criticizes him. Obviously, he claims that it's almost extinct, he says, fortunately, according to them, the Washington Post and so on, right? In which he claims, Silena says, those media outlets, imagine, they say we're losing the war. That's what they say. I mean, Trump says, if you look at the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, I mean, all the most important media outlets, he says, well, it would seem like they're losing the war, he says. I mean, he thinks they're winning it. That's the point, right? I mean, just because they win the battles doesn't mean they win the war. You can win every battle, 100% of the battles, like what basically happened in Vietnam, where they won almost every battle, but then who lost the war? I mean, that's just one example, right? But obviously it's not the only one. There's Ukraine-Russia too, right? That's another one, isn't it? I mean, you can win most or a good part of the battles, but that doesn't mean you win the war, right? Which, by the way, it's not officially a war, right? Officially, it's an operation. It's not a war from a legal standpoint for the United States. Obviously, it's not. I mean, but we already know how that goes. Also, speaking of all this, there was a whale that had been stranded in the Baltic for about 3 weeks. They finally managed to free it. The humpback whale that had been stranded for 3 weeks on the German coast of the Baltic Sea in Wismar Bay, in the federal state of Mecklenburg, started swimming again today. It freed itself, apparently not with help, but on its own apparently. The water rose a little, and that was enough for the whale to get out of the area. Well, we had been waiting for this situation for a while. Now, we can start to see a bit of what happened in that regard, right? Let's move on to other matters. How have you been? Greetings, Marcella. How have you been, Marcella? It's great to see you. Marcella says Trump is no longer convincing and the war goes on without a solution. Well, yes, I mean, up to now there's no strategy, right? That's the problem. And also, if you don't accept criticism, it's tough, right? Well, no, look, it's not turning out as expected, but this is going to be done. It's going to be done. I don't know, right? I don't know. The point is that it can't be avoided. At least from his point of view, if you don't tell him what he wants to hear, then you're basically against him, right? That's the classic. MT, how have you been? Greetings. He says, yeah, it's the same with the president of Mexico. He says, how have you been? He doesn't like it, right? He doesn't like being questioned, does he? Blanca Barcelona, how have you been? Blanca Barcelona, warm greetings. Carlos Martinez, how have you been? A big hello. Ruth Zambrano, how have you been? Also, a big hello. Thank you very much for your comment. Sebas too says, Spain doesn't have oil. He says, Sebas, greetings, Sebas. Very good, right? Why not? Who said it doesn't have oil? He says greetings about the robots. So there will be robots, but in controlled wars, like, hey, just imagine, right? It's just that they're moving fast on that topic, aren't they? He says, how has Carlos Martinez been? Hello? How are things going over there? And to the whole community, well, thank you for sharing, right? For liking. Yeah, all the social networks have been really weird lately, haven't they? It's been, well, really, really strange, hasn't it? What Spain has more than oil are refineries, right? That's the thing. They also have proven reserves of about 150 million barrels, which means, well, it's not a big deal, right? It's not that much. I mean, it's not like, they have oil, but not in excess, right? That's the reality too, isn't it? But enough to support the other countries, right? In short, it's not necessarily an oil-producing country, but it does have this Burgos area, right? That's what it's called, isn't it? That's basically where they import most of it, right? This covers the demand. It has strategic reserves. I think it's those 150 million barrels, which honestly isn't that much, but it does help. They say they have reserves for about 3 months, which is much more than most Asian countries, even European ones. For example, Europe, the United Kingdom, which is a rich and very powerful country, whatever you want to call it, doesn't have those reserves. So, in comparison, they do, right? They have some oil. Not excessively. They're not like Qatar or Japan, for example. Japan claimed they had enough for a year, then later said it would only last 6 months. I'm not sure how much they have, but Japan has been doing really well. Honestly, I don't think we've checked recently. Check how the Nikkei is doing. It's doing exceptionally well. Look, this is the Nikkei. There it is. Just look at that. Now, I think it's getting there. Let's see if it went above. Look, here it was on February 28th. Yeah, look, right? Well, it's already surpassed where it was, huh? I think the effect of the war has already been overcome. Let me see. Hold on. Let me check if we have it. Can we put it here? No, it's the same. It's at the point. Ah, wow. Let's see if you can see it there. I don't think it's been surpassed. Let's take a closer look. Let's stretch it a bit so we can see the graph. Even a small change, but it already surpassed it. If you see it, this is where it closed about. What would it be? This is today. This is Friday. I mean, on Friday, it already closed higher. It's just a tiny bit, right? Just a tiny bit. There it is, look. If you notice, on February 26, just before the war, it started to drop. And then with the war, it dropped even more. The Nikkei. We're talking about the Nikkei. Sorry, I didn't mention it. But there we see that it's a little bit higher. It's just a tiny bit above the price it was at before the war started. What does that mean? That there is a complete recovery. Completa. I mean, it's back to where it was. It's not like there's a gain either, but let's say that whole big problem, all that loss in the Nikkei, well, it's already resolved and now it's trending upward. With an upward trend. So that means my respects go on the attack. And yes, in that sense, because whatever he said internally, whatever he did, since I haven't really followed up on this much, I haven't had time, but, well, something good, he must be doing something right. Because this is clearly having an effect. It might not be heard directly, it could be indirect, but at least it's providing confidence. Because I mean, if the reaction had been one of distrust, it would have dropped. Now there must also be other factors like the reserves, right? That's also the result of years of prevention, preparation, and investment. I mean, in the end, it's a country that, in theory, likes to prepare a lot for the future, right? I mean, they're very focused on prevention in that sense, and that's having a very positive effect. That's where you see a strong economy. But let's take a look at Korea. I think Korea is the same, you know? I mean, Korea is almost the same. This is Korea. The Kospi, Korea's stock market, it's Kospi. Korea, look, not bad either. I mean, it's the same trend, right? Markets may be reacting to positive news beyond Japan. Let's check China. Let's see, here it is. This is China. Also, look. I mean, China hasn't recovered as much, but still, not bad either. I mean, this is the Shanghai one. Let's look at the Hong Kong one. Let me say it quickly. Let's see if I have it. I think I have it here. This is the Hong Kong one. Well, it's less, the recovery is smaller. It's not that big. There we see it, but they're also already in recovery, although far from where they were, well, before the war, let's say, back in February. All of this is February 28th to be exact. This is February 28th. And this is where the war begins. They're recovering quickly, reaching nearly the same level as during the war. This drop then is that part. Mexico, let's see, just like that, just for fun. Well, look, Mexico recovered even before Asia did. Here it was, 28, let's go to 28, here's the war. At this point, there's a drop after the war, and the recovery starts around March 25th. The markets recover and the trend is very similar to what the Asian markets are doing. I think, you know, it's a more or less global trend, right? From what I'm seeing. I imagine then we should see it in the Nasdaq. Let's look at the US tech companies. Look, it's just that they had a drop before. This drop was at the beginning of February, around February 3rd. Look, it dropped on February 3rd. It dropped because of other issues, because of other things. I don't remember anymore. So much happens that I'm not into the details and I just forgot. Maybe someone else recalls what that drop was at the start of February. There were a series of controversies over AI and all that back then, but I don't remember exactly what it was. And it wasn't a big drop, right? And then the recovery happened around here, on the 24th. They recovered before the war. I mean, the recovery starts during the war. This is during the war. The war didn't really affect them. It's like nothing happened. Maybe this little part here could be during the war. Yeah, maybe, but honestly, no, I really don't think so. No, they didn't even go to war. I mean, they're tech companies. They're not stable. They hit the data centers there, the servers and all that stuff they have there. Amazon, but it doesn't seem like it hit them very hard. I thought it did actually, but no. At least not so visibly, right? Maybe Amazon directly, but Amazon isn't here. Here it's all the tech companies. All kinds, right? I mean, like Google, for example. What's Facebook called now? well, Meta, right? They're here as Meta, and there's Nvidia, there are the video game companies, all those companies. So, well, it doesn't really seem like it hit them that hard. And well, that's how things are. Let's talk about oil before we move on to the comments. 94.96. So oil is at the bottom. It went up just a little bit. It was at 91. It's still higher than it was on Friday. But it even reached 97.89 today. I mean, it did go up quite a bit, and now it's down to 94.98, so it went up and now it's coming down. So in that sense, there's also some patience, right? Let's see what happens tomorrow, Tuesday, which is the ultimatum. The ultimatum is already in place. They don't even feel like ultimatums. There have been so many already that it's like, what's one more, right? Greetings. How has Jose been? Hi there. Thank you so much. How has Francisco Arce been? Also, big greetings in Roblox. What's up? It says an emperor blamed the Jews for his bad government in the 1st century. How has Carlos Martinez been? Greetings. And Talo, how have you been? Also, a big greeting to the whole community. Greetings. Hello. Thank you for being a member of the channel. By the way, the community that is a member, thank you so much for that support. There in the channel description, there are several ways to support us by becoming a member. You already know how you can support this informative channel. And well, that's it. Thank you very much. We'll be back later with more important information. Let's see how today's Monday update goes, right? Alright then, take care. See you later.